Welcome back, everybody. Today, me and James will be discussing tweeners in the NFL draft, which is players that play multiple positions and figuring out which position is best for them at the NFL level. Make sure you guys are subscribed to our YouTube at A to Z Sports Film Room, and make sure you guys are following us on Instagram at A to Z Sports Film Room and A to Z Sports NFL on Twitter. The football room is now open. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Destin Adams. The football room is now open. You guys know me here every single week. I'm an NFL draft analyst and Colts beat writer for A to Z Sports. Joining me this week, as always, my guy, Mr. X's and O's himself, James Foster. James, how you doing, man?
I'm doing outstanding. Watching a lot of basketball and listening to Future this week. So it's been pretty fun.
Yeah, so we'll put a disclaimer on this episode for Russell Wilson not to listen this week. You don't want to be a part of this episode. James just ruined it for you in the beginning. But Future this week, has there been a reason that Future has been on your mind this week?
Yeah, new album, him and Metro.
There you go. Anytime I hear James say he's outstanding, I just got to make sure, because James coming in that excited, you're not used to that. So new album this week has James going. So we're just gonna get a different James this week. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where all that energy is coming from. But we're tackling an interesting topic this week. The draft is a little less than a month away. We're under the month mark, so it's close, and there's multiple players in this class that are getting looked at multiple positions. That's not a new concept. It happens every year. I call these players tweeners. And that term for me comes from the fact that I played tennis growing up. And for those of you listening that may have played tennis or watched tennis, a tweener is known as when you hit the ball from between your legs as well. But I also use that to call players that are falling in multiple different positional categories. So me and James each have three players that we want to talk about and get the other person's perspective on what position we view them as. So we're each going to say a player, and then we're going to each kind of give our takes on what position we think they fall as. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to give a player, and James, I'm going to let you jump right in. So the first player I'm going to give you, I think this will be a little bit simple because I think we both view this guy pretty similar. I'm going to go Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. Johnny Wilson is kind of looked at as a receiver, a tight end. When you look at Johnny, though, what do you see, James?
Yeah, when I first watched Johnny Wilson's tape, it was a pretty simple decision to just move him to tight end. I think that he brings a lot of exciting traits to the table as far as, obviously the size, but the fluidity in and out of breaks at that size. He has some drop issues, but the catch radius is historic. And, I think that he offers a lot of intriguing things as a big slot or a tight end. But as far as winning out on the outside, I do kind of worry about him beating press because he is so big and it's such a big target for corners to land their punch. And, he's like a good athlete for his size, but I don't know if he's a great athlete just in his own right. Like I don't really see him outpacing elite corners down the field. And so I think that combined with the fact that he's a really good blocker, I think projects him pretty easily into that Darren Waller, Mike Gesicki type of role. He at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine did all of his workouts with the receivers. So my expectation is that he's going to start out at receiver in the NFL, but it wouldn't surprise me, especially if he isn't able to find success there, if that's kind of the second phase of his career as a move to tight end.
Yeah, so Johnny Wilson, similar for me when I first put him on, I saw a tight end on tape. To me, he looked like a guy that at receiver, I think he can be a good receiver at the next level. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think he can be a special receiver at the next level. But when I see him on tape from the blocking, the way he moves, I think the mismatches that he will be able to put himself in as a tight end is going to put him into that echelon of, I think he can be a special tight end at the next level if a team is able to scheme him out correctly. Now it'll all be about matchups with Johnny Wilson. If you can put Johnny in that slot area and scheme him onto a linebacker, scheme him onto a safety, like those are the situations where I feel like he can just make a defense pay. On the outside, I feel like you still see it. Like we saw him in one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. Like he still had some really solid reps against corners. Like don't get me wrong, but I remember my favorite rep of Johnny Wilson came against a safety at the Senior Bowl. He went one-on-one with Ballard from Georgia, took the guy's lunch money. It just was not a competition there. And I really feel like that's the position you can put him in at tight end. It'll be interesting to kind of see where he lands. I would not take him on day 2 as a receiver. Like you said, though, I do think wherever he ends up early on, probably going to start out as a receiver. I just wouldn't be shocked if we get into training camp, he starts doing those individual drill workouts, and the team that drafts him realizes, like, man, like this kid, it may not be able to play right away as a receiver, but like we could get him on the field as a tight end. And sometimes that's all it takes. Guys just want to be on the field, and if I can get on the field as a receiver, put me on the field as a receiver. If I can get on the field as a tight end, put me on the field as a tight end. But to me, I can't get over the fact whenever I watch Johnny, he looks more like a tight end than a receiver. The way he moves, the way he does everything he does. So we'll see kind of how things fall for him. But for me, I think we're on the same page there. Johnny Wilson would be better at tight end. Doesn't say he's not a good receiver, but would be better at tight end. So James, who's the first tweener that you want to throw my way?
So the first one is probably the most discussed as far as what position they're going to play, and I'll go Cooper DeJean out of Iowa.
Cooper DeJean. This is always a fun one. Corner, safety, can kind of play. Like usually when you're talking corners and safeties, it's like, are you a nickel corner or are you a deep safety? Cooper's a little bit different. Like, he could play everywhere, and he did at Iowa. He played outside corner. He played in the slot. He played both safety spots. You kind of saw him in the box safety role as well. When I look at him, though, it's definitely going to be dependent on which team he goes to and the scheme he's in, obviously. But my favorite role for Cooper DeJean definitely is in that like hybrid safety role. I think of Gardner Johnson, who is in Philadelphia now.
Yep.
Was where he signed again this offseason, was in Philly, went to Detroit, back in Philly. A guy like that who teams allow to kind of use their instincts a little bit more in the role. It's a little bit more dependent on what play actually comes out. If you let DeJean be a guy that can kind of identify what's going on a play and move accordingly. Like, I think he has good enough instincts and he's a good enough athlete, which I think people kind of forget about a little bit because we didn't get to see him at the combine because he was still nursing his injury. All signs that I've heard is he's gonna have his own version of a pro day. It's gonna be like kind of like a private workout with teams about a week or two prior to the draft. So it's cutting really, really close. But teams are gonna get to see him move before the draft, which I think is gonna help him out a lot, and will probably put him back on that upper echelon of this DBs in this class. But when I do see him mostly, I do think that hybrid safety type mold is probably where I think he will be the most successful. But like this guy is so unique because I think there are certain zone schemed defenses that he can be a really good corner. And I know that there is a negative connotation that comes when you are a white corner in the NFL, mostly because they really don't exist anymore. There's not a high influx of guys coming out playing corner that look like me and James, for example. But like, I really do think Cooper has the talent and skill set and instincts to where he can play corner. He's a really, really unique prospect. I had him falling into the second round in my newest mock draft that posted yesterday to Indianapolis. And in Indianapolis, for example, I think he'd play corner over safety, just because of how their defensive scheme works and how I think he'd fit there. But I think the best role for him at the next level is in that hybrid safety role.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I have him as a safety on my board, but I think that there are certain schemes that he could play corner. You mentioned the Colts defense. You know, with as much cover three as they play, I could see that working out. Um, I don't really want him like in man coverage on the outside because I think that there are some limitations with Cooper DeJean. If he had like a full testing profile, I would guess that he would have a pretty high RAS score. But just in terms of actually playing the cornerback position, I think that there are a lot of weaknesses or limitations on tape. There's a little bit of stall when he has to turn and accelerate vertically. It's why I wish they had corners run their 40-yard dashes like starting turned around, because a big part of corner is having to flip your hips and then accelerate downfield. That's where I really saw the issues with Cooper DeJean. It's not as much like straight line speed, crashing downhill, which I think he can do at a high level. And like didn't really look comfortable turning around and locating the ball deep down the sideline. And I also think just like some hip tightness as far as defending comebacks. It takes him a while to sink his hips and throttle down. So yeah, I think that if he plays in the slot, I think that could be a great role for him. Not only to protect him from his limitations, but also because you get him in the run fit and you get to you get him to add value in that phase. And I think any of the safety roles he could play at a high level, and then like you said, a more zone heavy defense. I think he could absolutely play on the outside.
Yeah, it'll really be interesting because I think because of how much talent is still available in the safety area of free agency. And I think some of these vets are probably being told by their teams at this point to kind of wait for contracts till post the draft, where teams may get a little bit more desperate for a safety in that market. I'm really curious to see if whatever team lands DeJean is a team that drafts him and then looks at the safety market and tries to figure out if they can add a safety now that they've added DeJean to kind of let him move to corner, or kind of let training camp battles dictate where he plays, because he's one of the very few that I put him at corner and safety on my board, just because I think he's really, really dependent on which scheme he falls in. So it'll be really fun to kind of see where Cooper ends up and how teams operate under that. But we're going to move over to the offensive line. There's a few guys in this class to choose from. I know that I ended up picking one. We'll see if James had one for us to discuss as well. But I tried to pick one that I actually had to go back and forth on, because some of the guys that are being listed as tweeners in this class, it was pretty easy for me to dictate. This guy I had to go back and forth a little bit on. So I'm going to go with Graham Barton out of Duke. He's getting looked at as a tackle. He's getting looked at as a guard. But James, how do you view Graham Barton?
Yeah, I have Graham Barton as a guard on my board. He started out his career playing center. I think for Barton, any of the three interior offensive line spots is where he would fit best. His biggest issue on tape is dealing with power, which is something that is going to be a liability at any offensive line position. But there's also some times that you'll see the lack of length kind of limit him as far as protecting the outside against speed rushes. So yeah, he could maybe be like a swing tackle if you deal with an injury or something and you need to plug him in there for a drive or two. But I think as far as a full-time role, Graham Barton is clearly a guard or a center to me. And depending on how you have the positions stacked up, you could make the argument that he's the best interior offensive lineman in this class.
Yeah, so I've had to go back and forth on Graham Barton a lot. He's another guy like Cooper for a long time. I had him listed as both in ranking boards and was kind of trying to figure it out on the fly. Um, his most played position in college was left tackle, which causes the issue. I mean, last year played 492 snaps at left tackle. 2022 played 895. 2021 played 747. All of those coming at left tackle over the last 3 years. Didn't log a single snap at any other alignment over the last three, at Duke at least, during regular season play. Now, like it'll be interesting though, because when I see him on tape, like there are certain parts of, I think it's his build that really swings me to guard a lot. But like you said, like the thing that has really been going through my mind a lot as I've watched him and a lot more of the interior guys in this class over the last couple of weeks, is his struggle with power, right? And his ability to use his center mass and just dictate whether or not he's given up a rep to what's coming his way. And because of that, like, and I keep seeing how he moves vertically, and I really do think this guy could be a tackle on my board. I think he is more comfortable there, which is going to be a really big thing. And at the end of the day, you make more money at tackle. So I think for a player like Graham, I think he's going to go pretty high in this class. I've heard a lot of people think he's going to go in the late end of round one from who I've talked to. He ended up sliding to the Packers in the end of my first round mock yesterday. And I really do think he's going to end up playing tackle, at least early in his career. So we'll see how things dictate and where he goes. But via how he was used at Duke, via how I think he moves, and via the fact that I think the flaws in his game are going to be put on more display at guard, I really do think he's going to at least start out as tackle. So it was actually just 2 days ago that I made the full switch on my big board, that he's no longer listed in my guards, and I have him just listed in my tackles. I still think it's going to be dependent on what team he goes to. I think every team has different thresholds that you kind of have to meet to play certain positions via how they look at the position. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where he falls. But the more and more I watch him, the more I look at different team fits that he could fall in. I think he's going to be a tackle on most teams' boards.
Really?
I do.
I mean, I think there's a good amount of teams that will just have him as a guard purely based off of the arm length threshold. Like, I would bet the majority of teams are not letting people play tackle with under 33-inch arms. And then I think of the teams that don't have the threshold, that's where there would be the real debate. But like, I think that being able to deal with power is arguably just as important at tackle as it is at guard. Because if you look at someone like Graham Barton, he's going to be probably having to take a lot of vertical sets because he doesn't have that extra cushion with his length to really protect the outside. And if you're going to take a vertical set, that's basically just inviting speed to power. So to be able to really take vertical sets in the NFL and survive, you've got to be able to eat a bull rush. And like, I don't really think that Graham Barton has shown that ability. So I would definitely disagree with that.
Hey, I thought Graham would be one. Like I said, there's a lot in this class that are in that tackle or guard situation. I think it's probably the most common tweener combo every year at this point. Or is if this guy who played tackle in college is going to have to move to guard via his skill set, via his size. I do think me covering the Colts has opened my mind a little bit more on arm length for tackles. We saw Braden Smith come from college, play mostly guard, switched, never played a snap of guard in the NFL, and has been a full-time tackle the entire time now, with on the shorter arm size of things. And Braden Smith's been great, and I've seen them try it with multiple other guys too, and it's worked out. That I think it's in my head a little bit because it's happened so many times with the Colts over these last 4 or 5 years now, that I start to see it more as a thing that can happen. And I understand that you're going to face bull rushes in both areas. It's just, to me, it's so much easier as an offense to help a guy out against it if that's something they struggle with if they're playing tackle. because when you're at guard, when you're at center, it's so hard to open any area up. Whereas I think there are things that Barton can do and that an offense can teach him and make him do off the outside that can at least counteract the bull rush that's going to come his way better than putting him at guard or center. And I think if you put him at guard or center, like it's going to be a situation to where he's going to have to get help a lot. And at tackle, I feel like you're going to be able to scheme it to where it's one-on-one more often. And on the offensive line, as much as you can go one-on-one and trust your guys to do it, the better it's going to allow your offense to go. Because if you're having to ask for a double team early in his career, you might as well not play him right away, in my opinion. For a guy who's going to go in the top 2 rounds, I just don't know if that's very realistic.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the Colts because they're probably the most like athletic traits centered
Definitely one of
team
them.
in the
Team,
NFL,
yes.
and they probably have the shortest average arm length of tackles because Bernard Raymond's under 33 inches, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So yeah,
That was
that's
one of
I
the big
never
question
even
marks
thought
with
of that.
him 2 years ago in his class too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll stick with the offensive line guard tackle tweeners, and my next guy is going to be Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State. Where do you have him on your board?
Yeah, so Fuaga is another guy. I mean, this one was a little bit easier for me just because he's so dominant, and for a guy to be that good, like it's gonna go as early as I think he should go. I think if you can play tackle at a high level and you're a player, why go inside? And with Fuaga, I think that's the case. I think he's so good that I just don't see a reason for him to go inside. I think a lot of the questions that were put on him, I think he was able to answer at the Senior Bowl. He spent the majority of his snaps. I don't know if he logged a snap at guard. Maybe you can be able to correct me there at the Senior Bowl. It felt like he worked with the tackles for the majority of the time he was there for sure. But I really do think Fuaga is a guy that is dominant enough to play tackle, is going to go high enough to play tackle. So if I was Fuaga, if I was in his team, why would I give up the money that it's going to take to go to guard in the next level? Obviously, it doesn't affect your rookie contract money-wise, but when it comes time to that second deal, give me tackle money over giving me guard money. I think that's a pretty self-explanatory thing. And for Fuaga, I think he moves well enough to play tackle. I think he's strong enough to play tackle. And I think he's smart enough to play tackle. Like I think he's a guy that understands the concepts of playing tackle enough that even if there might be a little bit of learning curves here and there for a guy that some teams are going to have listed as guard, I think it's just how good of a player he is to me that I'm playing him tackle if I draft him in the first.
Yeah, so I have Fuaga as a guard. For me, I think that the biggest issue is just pocket range and being able to get enough depth to block speed rushes. He's also got some technical issues just with his outside hand, where he's really over aggressive punching with the outside hand, and that'll if that gets swiped down, he doesn't really have the recovery ability to flip his hips and get depth around the corner. So to me, it was another pretty easy conversion to guard for Fuaga. With most of these players, I think that the best course of action is to, if you're drafting someone in the first round, it's usually good practice to try to get as much value out of that rookie contract as possible. And so if there's anyone that I think has a chance to succeed at tackle, which I think Fuaga does, I would definitely try him at tackle to start out. But for me, I'm drafting Fuaga with the long-term plan that he's going to be a guard, and I think he has all pro potential on the inside.
Hey, I get it. And I think there would probably be teams that agree with you. I am curious. Like, this was not a guy we had planned on saying, but just because you've gone guard on both the guys we've said so far, and apologize because this wasn't a guy you were preparing to talk about by any means. But like Washington's like Troy Fontanu, like another guy looked at guard as tackle. I ended up landing on tackle with him, but I'm curious of if where you view him.
Yeah, so Fautanu, I think that if I had a position slot for offensive lineman, that's where he would fall. Out of all of the potential guard tackle converts, I think he's probably the one that I think has the best chance to survive on the outside. Um, you know, his issues come on tape come with inside counters. Like, he loses to an inside spin, it feels like every game. And then also dealing with power, which, like we discussed, is an issue that's going to be persistent no matter what offensive line spot you play. So yeah, I think Troy Fontenot is more of a tackle with positional versatility, as opposed to someone like Fuaga, Barton, Jordan Morgan, players that are, I think, pretty clearly, like, at least if I was running a team, would be pretty clearly moving inside. Fautano is more just like, let's take him and see where he plays best.
Yeah, so Fontanu is one that I have at both spots still on my board. Haven't fully moved him to one area. I don't know if I will, to be honest. I just think he's a guy that I think can play both, to the point that I have him just ranked on both. You have Jordan Morgan as a guard over tackle still.
Oh yeah.
Hey, see these are why this is why I threw out another person in there, because I was just curious, because a lot of these tweeners just felt like that's where you were going here. But
Hey, let me see. I've got Dominic Pooney moving to guard. He played left tackle at Kansas. Delmar Glaze out of Maryland played left tackle. I've got him as a guard. And Isaiah Adams played kind of all over the offensive line for Illinois, but I've got him moving to guard as well. So
I have Isaiah Adams at guard too. So we can agree on some. We can agree on some. That's good to see. But moving over here, we're going to go back into the secondary for my last player, and that's going to be Auburn defensive back Jalen Simpson. Spent time at safety and corner. So we're going back to the secondary after we had DeJean earlier. How do you view Jalen Simpson?
So I have Jalen Simpson as a safety, and to be honest, it hadn't even crossed my mind, the idea of him playing at corner, because I only watched his 2023 tape. Um, Now that I'm looking at it, though, I see that he played corner early in his career some. So that's really interesting. Jalen Simpson, like, has some really exciting flashes on tape. The Georgia game, especially, like, he had a few games where it felt like he was just around the ball constantly. But there are some serious size limitations with Simpson, 179 pounds. You see that show up when he, like, tries to engage with blocks. That shows up as a tackler. He'll just kind of bounce off contact. And so even though he is really fast and instinctive, I feel like at safety, there's a little bit of a cap on his ceiling there. The idea of moving him to corner, though, is really interesting, and something that I hadn't thought of. He definitely has the athleticism for it. That speed and fluidity and explosiveness were never really questions for me with Jalen Simpson. So, yeah, I mean, that's more of just like food for thought of something that I need to, think about. Maybe he could play safety and check out some of his tape from 2022.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. I mean, you really only saw him play in the slot then, at corner, if you watched in 2023. Like, if you've only watched 2023 on him. I have his snap counts up right now. He spent 195 snaps in the slot last year. But then in 2022, 222 as an outside corner, 505 in 2021 as an outside corner. He's been an interesting eval for me. A guy, I still land that I think his best role at the next level, and where I think he's going to play the most, is as a deep safety. I think it allows him to use his ball skills the best, and I think it'll allow teams to kind of scheme him better, in sense of putting him in position to succeed as a deep safety. but we've seen him play in the box. We've seen him play deep. I think it's funny to say he played off the defensive line multiple times in 2023, 2022, mostly in 2022. I think it was he ended up going over 10 snaps like before I last looked at him as a defensive off the defensive line. So very versatile player that I think if I were in charge, I'd put him in that deep safety role, let him drop back, let him watch where the ball is coming and move accordingly. I think he will be the most successful in that role. But I mean, I think a guy with his type of ball skills is going to be successful. He's a guy that I've always said that if your team is looking for a safety in this class that's not great at safety, don't get me wrong, but he's a guy at safety that I think is going to end up going early day 3-ish. Like, I think he's talented enough to take in that 4th or 5th round, bring him into training camp, and I won't be shocked if I see somebody is starting Jalen Simpson week 1 of his rookie year, even if he is going in day 3.
Yeah. I'll definitely have to check him out in 2022 because I was really high on him early in the process because like I started with the Georgia game and some other game, and they were like 2 of his best games of the season, and then kind of cooled off as the year progressed. Didn't think he was that great at the Senior Bowl, but like you said, probably an early day 3 player, and it'll be interesting to see what he looks like at corner. So my last tweener is going to be Darius Robinson out of Missouri, kind of a defensive end, played defensive tackle last year, moved out on the edge this season. What position do you have Darius Robinson at?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a tweener in this class, like just a tweener, it's Darius Rock. Like the guy can play anywhere on the defensive line and has at Missouri. So it'll be really interesting to see where he ends up because I mean, the more and more people that I talk to in Mobile, I think a lot of teams are viewing him as a 3-tech, a guy that will spend most of his early downs there, maybe kick him on the outside on like very specific rundowns. But like that 3 technique area, that 5 technique area, like those are the 2 spots that I feel like he could go in between and the inside and make a lot of money at the pro level. And we'll see where he ends up. But the more and more I've watched him, I think that's where his main role at the NFL is going to be. But I definitely think he's a guy that can live on the outside. I think he moves well enough. He's big. He's long. There's going to be teams that view him that way. Like, for example, I cover the Colts. I think the Colts would probably look at him as an edge that can kick inside, which they let a lot of their guys do. So it'll all be about fit. But on my board, I moved him to the interior entirely as a player just because the more and more people I talk to around the league, I think that's where he's going to play. Like I really do think that 3 technique. That's where I keep coming back to is the 3 technique. But I really do think he can be successful as a 5 as well.
Yeah, I'm working on my edge rankings video right now, and it's like I'm having kind of similar thoughts of like maybe I should just move this guy to defensive lineman because like my edge 5 is Chop Robinson, and then going to edge 4 and talking about Darius Robinson, it's like they're playing 2 completely different positions. I think as far as like what he can bring as a pass rusher, I think he can win on the outside. Like he's got the moves. He's really good with his hands. Actually has decent bend for someone of his size. Really, the one hang up that I have with him playing out on the edge is like if they run read option at Darius Robinson, he doesn't really have the speed to like carry a mobile quarterback out to the sideline. You see that show up sometimes on his tape. And so I think that there are some ways that you can kind of exploit Darius Robinson in certain schemes in the run game if he's out on the outside. But other than that, yeah, I think that he's like the ultimate tweener / versatile defensive end, defensive tackle, edge, whatever you want to call him. I think, playing like a 5 technique role, like you said, is probably his best fit. And my comp for him is Cam Jordan. So I think just let him have his hand in the ground, get after the quarterback.
Yeah, the Cam Jordan mock makes a lot of sense. I've heard it from a lot of different people. And I think, like, I don't know, for me, that's like ever since the Senior Bowl, like I moved from is he an edge or is he an interior guy debate to do I think he's better at the 3 tech or the 5 tech? Like that's really where I've been recently on him, is which of those two do I think he's better at? Um, I still ultimately land that I think he's going to make the most money at 3 tech, but I definitely think he could play the 5 at a high level as well. He may have to add a little bit of weight to get to the ceiling that I think he can get to as a 3 tech, but like I really do think via his size, via how he moves, via how he attacks the ball, you put him at the 3. I think he can be a real difference maker. And for a guy that's gonna go at the end of round 1, early round 2, like to me, I'm always gonna look at like what is that role that optimizes his skill set the most, and that's why I've landed on the 3-5 comparisons instead.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then, hey, that's been us discussing tweeners. We're going to move into the draft tank, a segment that I've not been able to do since we started this show. We've had so many different things going on, and it's going to be a quicker one just because I don't think it needs a lot of explanation. And I didn't think it was a hot take that I had to step up and say, but man, oh man, the more people that come out talking about this quarterback class, I all of a sudden feel the need to defend Drake May, which I didn't think was going to have to happen. But Drake May falling to 11 in an NFL mock draft yesterday from an NFL Network person, it rubbed me the wrong way. I just do not understand how a player like Drake May, a player of his caliber, is all of a sudden becoming the quarterback in this class that is getting over scrutinized, which it happens every year. So it's not like shocking that a quarterback is getting over analyzed right now. It's part of the reason that I think the draft should be before free agency, make it faster, less time for these kind of takes to come out. Last year it was with CJ Stroud, obviously, and all the things that went down with him. He still went second overall. So it worked out fine for him, ends up winning Rookie of the Year. But when I watched Drake May on tape, like, I mean, this is a guy I landed on as my quarterback 1 in this class. Very, very close between him and Caleb Williams. I ended up going May as my QB1 over Williams simply because I give May a larger edge as a player that can play in structure compared to Williams, compared to Daniels. Um, I think he plays at a higher rate in structure than those two guys. While I think all three are good out of structure. And I think all three have the ability to play in structure. I just think there's more proven tape on May doing it. That if I was drafting these 3 quarterbacks and had to put one as my franchise guy that I felt the safest about. I felt like still has the high upside is Drake May. I think Drake has the arm. I think Drake is able to move out of the pocket and make plays. I think he is a very high IQ'd player that is able to read a defense well and attack the defense well. Like I think all 3 of these top quarterbacks are going to have their struggles at the next level. Don't get me wrong; they're rookie quarterbacks for a reason. But I think a world where Drake May drops past pick 2 is wild to me. And in the odd chance that a team at 2 would prefer Jaden Daniels, I could probably understand it. But if you're telling me that this guy falls beyond being quarterback 3 and JJ McCarthy jumps Drake May and he ends up being quarterback 4, I just don't understand what's going on with talent evaluators in the NFL, because like this guy can play. This guy can play at a high level, and like I think he just has franchise quarterback written all over him. So for him to drop any farther than quarterback 3, I'm going to be losing my mind come draft day. But that's just me personally and how I view these quarterbacks. But for me, Drake May, I have him as quarterback 1, like I said. But for him to fall any farther than quarterback 3 in this class, like to me, is going to get people fired.
Yeah, I mean, so is the take that he won't fall further than 3?
Yeah, I mean, there's just no chance. Like I got angry. I'm sorry. I should have calmed down at the end, made the take. But to me, I just don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's real. I think every year we see the smoke come. And in my opinion, right now, I think Drake May's floor is the third pick in the NFL draft still.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna agree with that. If I was like in control of, if I was the GM for all 32 teams, then absolutely, there's no way he's getting past the second pick. Um, Man, it's always hard. I do think that the idea of like smoke screens is kind of being overblown and just conflated with like anytime there's a report that comes out that like I disagree with, it's like, oh, that's a smoke screen. So there is some part of me that gives some legitimacy to these reports that teams are higher on Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy. To me, that's just ridiculous based on the tape. I can kind of see Jaden Daniels. I can see how you get there in your head, but with JJ McCarthy, I mean, unless he's like curing cancer in their interviews, I don't really see what McCarthy has over Drake May. Drake May has a stronger arm. Drake May is less accurate, but I wouldn't describe JJ McCarthy as accurate. I think that Drake May is a better decision maker. I think that he has better processing skills. I think he's more athletic. I think he throws with touch better. I think if you just need to like laser a ball down the seam, I would probably take JJ McCarthy, give him like a slight nod, but I never felt like velocity was an issue with Drake May. So yeah, like to me, it's just they're in completely different tiers as quarterback prospects, and there's even like a tier gap in between McCarthy and May. Could definitely be wrong. Won't be the first time and won't be the last, but yeah, based on the tape, McCarthy over Drake May just makes absolutely no sense to me. And Jaden Daniels over Drake May, I think is I disagree with. Although I do think that, like we've talked about this before, I think there's a lot of people that are overrating Jaden Daniels and a lot of people that are underrating Jaden Daniels as far as like what he can do from the pocket as a processor, throwing over the middle of the field. I think is an underrated skill of his. But I'm still taking Drake May over him.
I mean, for me, I mean, I've come a long way on McCarthy. Like, don't get me wrong. There was a point where he wasn't my quarterback 4. He's pretty solidified in that role now. I basically have it in a tier setup, like you kind of brought up. Like, I have May and Williams as tier 1 in this class. I have Jaden Daniels by himself in tier 2. I have McCarthy by himself in tier 3. And then I have a 4th tier that has a larger grouping of guys. And at the end of the day, we'll see how it works out. Last year, I had to deal with this with Stroud being my quarterback 1 in the class and seeing everything that was happening with him. And he still ends up being the 2nd overall pick. And even if that was a crazy shock, that was kind of a last-minute switch that happened. But either way, I just do not see it. I still had Drake May going 2nd overall in my mock yesterday to Washington. I pretty much set on that unless cemented information comes out to prove me otherwise, I'm going to have him going 2nd overall. I just think he's that good. But I think Jaden Daniels is good enough too that I don't see why New England would pass on that at 3 either. So I think the world should go that we see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3. And I know that's not something we've seen often, but I think it's something that's going to happen this year.
Yep, I agree.
But hey, this has been the Football Room. The draft tank is back, and I got a buyer. Let me know in the comments, by the way, if you guys are buying this Drake May smoke, or if you think, if you're buying it, you think it's real, it's not smoke. And let me know in the comments why I'm overrating Drake May. But this has been the Football Room, everybody. My name is Destin. This is James. We will be back next week to talk more football as the NFL draft is closer and closer by the day.